Welcome to another episode of the Transforming Lives panel podcast. I am one of your hosts, Sharmin Prince, and I have Mitzy here with me today. Also, we have a guest, but before we continue, just join me in taking a few deep breaths so that we can be centered and grounded. Take a deep breath in through your nose, out through your mouth. If it's comfortable, just close your eyes and relax and pay attention to the breath in and out, in and out. And as you take this breath in, just let go of all the tensions, the mishap, the emotional threats, all the disappointments, anything that has not served you today. Just let it go. Take another deep breath in and let it go. And take another breath in and just be grounded. And when you're ready, just join me back into the room. Thank you. Thank you. And today our guest is Brenda Bridges. And this is a person with a wealth of expertise as a financial advisor, a mediator, certified divorce financial analyst, a certified divorce coach, and an author. And Brenda uniquely blends her personal stories and professional insights, making her an exceptional guide for those navigating the journey of divorce. In her insightful book, I'm getting divorced. I need to repeat that. Oh shit, I'm getting divorced. Brenda offers a compassionate and comprehensive guide that goes beyond the mere logical process of asset division and legal proceedings. She acknowledges the deeply emotional and human side of this life transition, serving as a crucial companion for those grappling with both the practicalities and emotional upheaval of divorce. Get ready to be inspired and educated as Brenda Bridges shares her invaluable expertise and experiences. Welcome, Brenda.
Thank you, Sharmin. I hope I will live up to that. I'm so happy to be here with both of you. And I must say, I love the way you start your podcast. It is such a good way to take a pause, take a moment, take a breath, and refocus. I just thoroughly celebrate that. Thank you. Thank you for that moment.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. You never know how people take it. But we find that most guests seem to share the same thought as you, is that it's kind of a nice reset for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brenda, where are you located?
I am in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Okay.
For about 4 years.
Great. Well, you are dealing in an area that is near and dear to my heart. I'm a real estate broker, and one of the clients that I work a lot with is couples going through a divorce. And I've written a book to help them in dealing with, selling their real estate, which is usually one of their biggest assets when they're going through a divorce. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing some of your insights and thoughts, because it is, it can be one of those things where everybody's getting along, but unfortunately, if one person goes off the rails, it really doesn't matter what the other person does. All is going to break loose.
It is. And it's like when you think about your home, it's your home. It's where you built your dreams. Like there's so much attached to it. And when you're going through the emotional and financial issues that are part of divorce and facing, it's hard to sell a home anyway. Not that in this market it tends to be hard to move it, but just the work that is involved with selling a home is much more than you think of top of mind. And then when you're going through all this other stuff, yeah, thank goodness they have you to walk them through it because it is not easy.
Well, and it's great that you're a financial planner that specializes in this area because it really is unique because people spend so much time accumulating their assets and trying to make them grow, and then all of a sudden you're trying to divide them and
Yeah.
hopefully keep things fair, but different people will be attached to different of their assets, businesses, other investments and things. So can you tell us a little bit about, what the process looks like when you start to work with a client and kind of just guide us through a little bit of that?
I like our first calls to be kind of a triage, meaning usually people, when I get that first call, don't know exactly what they want or what they need. Some do, but usually they haven't had a conversation that's about their goals and what they want their life to look like when this is all done. It's more like the title of my book, Oh Shit, I'm Getting Divorced, which is also the subtitle is The Guide to Keeping Your Dignity in Dollars. But originally, the title of that book was How to Divorce with Dignity and Grace. However, when we tested it, it didn't resonate because that's not the first reaction. When you're, even if you're the one asking for the divorce or you're the one hearing that from your partner, usually the first feeling is not like, I'm going to breathe. The first feeling is, shit, what am I going to do? I don't know how to do this. There are so many unknowns. Societally, the advice seems to be like, get out there and hire yourself a really good attorney. And just like you start your podcast with, let's take a pause and recenter, I suggest you start the process of divorce with take a pause and recenter. So by saying triage, what I mean is people will call and we'll do some talking about like, what is their situation? Have they talked to their spouse? Do they have a clear picture of their options? Do they know what they want life to look like after divorce? And we start trying to frame things in what are you moving towards instead of what are you running away from? Or what are you leaving? Or what are you exiting? Whatever words we use. And by reframing to what do you want things to look like and keeping it focused on goals and moving forward, we do a couple of things. One is we start to like do that muscle memory of let's focus on what you want, not on what you don't want. And it's way more likely to happen. Our subconscious minds are always listening. And if we're talking about what we don't want, it's kind of honing in on that. So if we're saying more what we do want, it can hone in on that. And then you can shape how you're going to go through divorce in the most appropriate way for you. Because, people will say, well, my cousin went through a divorce and they love their attorney. They were great. I'm going to hire that attorney. That's the attorney for me. But their marriage is different. Their situation might be different. They might not be appropriate for them. So we start with, hopefully, defining purpose. So I call them the 3 Ps. And the first thing is purpose. It is not hiring an attorney. It is not, you've been served to your spouse. It is not emptying a bank account. It is figuring out what do you want your life to look like when this divorce is done? And then that should be your North Star for the decisions you make. Now, divorce is crazy making and frustrating and a horrible process that we're trying to make better. So are you always going to be able to do that? Absolutely not. None of us do in our lives. Like, I always do the right thing. I always keep focused on my goals. But at least if we have that to try to come back to and recenter on and think about, I said that I wanted, XYZ. Are my actions moving me towards that? Or did I just have a really, really garbage day and I'm acting out because everything went sideways and I'm sending a text to my ex that maybe I shouldn't, or I'm blaming them for something, or I'm, doing an action that might sabotage things or make things worse because it's not on center. It's not on goal. That was a lot of talking. So
That's Fine. Thank you for that. Thank you for that introduction. And I guess my question is, what motivated you? What
Oh,
drove you into that space?
a lot of people in this space ended up here because of the same reason I did. I had a really nasty, ugly, expensive divorce. And afterwards went, there's got to be a better way. So I do what I do in hopes that in ways, small or large, I can help other people from not experiencing what I did or some version of that. So I think if we continue to help people not fall into this, well, this is how we do it. I know a lot of attorneys, I worked with some excellent attorneys. And then I also know of and have worked with attorneys who are like, well, this is just how we do it. Like, and how we do it is we take a couple years, we spend tens of thousands of dollars. All the decisions are made in the backdrop of the court. People don't understand what's going on. Like it turns into this runaway train of a process that is really taking people's personal lives, putting it in a criminal system because the court system, the legal system, I mean, essentially you go to court, it's for an offense. And people in divorce, 9 times out of 10, it's not an offense situation. It's for whatever reason, one or both parties have decided that they don't want to be married anymore. It's not something I wish on anyone. I wish every marriage was like the happily ever after marriage. I wish mine had been, but it wasn't. So given that somewhere around half of marriages are going to end in divorce, how do we help people make good, solid, intelligent decisions there so that they're not like I was 10 years ago, 9 years ago, where I didn't know where to start. I didn't know who to trust. I didn't know where to get good information. And I found that when you start having conversations with people, there's this tendency to get in this, I call it drama trauma, because everyone wants to know, like, what happened? What went wrong? Who did what to whom? It creates this soap opera kind of intrigue where what you really need is going back to you and your voice, Sharmin, at the beginning of the podcast. You need someone to go, let's talk, let's breathe, let's take a moment, let's figure out, let's walk down this path of the choices you need to make and help you figure out what the best ones for you and your family are. And they're all situational, right? If someone is in a really abusive situation, they're going to take one track. If someone is in a situation where maybe even when they got married, they just kind of fell into it and they were never really committed to each other and they've really grown apart, but they really like each other. They're good people. They don't hate the other person. They just know that they're going to move on and want to move on. They're going to take a different path. So what I try to do, and the reason I try to do it, is match supporting the people in the actions they need to take to what best fits their life and their scenario. And the more I dig in and the more years I spend in this, I guess the more I see the damage that's done when that doesn't happen. People that could have gone through a divorce process much more simply or spending less money, or probably most important, having a better relationship with their ex, especially if there are kids, the more meaningful and important this becomes to just keep letting people know you don't have to fight it out in court. You can take the power, you can make your decisions. You probably need assistance because there's a lot at stake. Like Mitzy mentioned, you're dividing houses and retirement funds. You're dividing big ticket items that in some cases are millions and millions of dollars. Making a mistake can be really expensive. My divorce had $1 million mistake in it that took 4 years to unravel and going back to court, and it just made things worse. If that had not happened, things would have been better, I do believe. So
Do they have collaborative lawyers in the States? In Canada here, we have a process where you can have collaborative lawyers where you're sort of working and it's more of like a mediation type process, everybody working together versus your side versus my side.
Yes, the answer is yes, kinda. So it's very regional here. I moved here from Illinois, and in fact, I was the president of Illinois Collaborative Association when I moved, and right before I moved. The collaborative process there was pretty strong and well known. Cincinnati, California, Texas, there are certain regions and states that have a really good collaborative resource for people. So I'm in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and here we do have a collaborative group of 3. So part of it is if there are 2 attorneys who are collaboratively trained, and then I'm collaboratively trained and as a coach and financial analyst. So we can do collaborative divorce, but there's not a lot of choice for people here. So we're trying to get other professionals to do the training and just make it more available to people. I
Yeah,
think
because if you can do that, as you say, it makes the process. The lawyers are trying to, it seems like, work more with you than sort of against each other and be the quote winner.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely true. I really believe in the process. And you'll have, we used to call it big C, little c collaborative. So big C collaborative, you've been trained in it. You've done the 40 hours, you do the continuing education, you show up for the seminars, you go to the workshops, all the things. Lawyers or other professionals will say, oh yeah, sure, I can do collaborative. Like I play nice in the sandbox. But if you're not trained, I haven't seen it work really well. It really requires people who have learned the languaging where exactly what you said, instead of using words like you're giving up or you're gaining or you're winning or you could fight for. It's goal based. And that's my mediation model is the same thing. It's very goal based. What do you want when you're done? What do you want for your kids? What do you want for yourself? What do you even want for your ex? What do you want it to look like? And then the team in the collaborative process works to help people make their decisions based on what they said their goals were. I've got a case that I'm working on here because I do litigation support as well that's going to court tomorrow. And it's just such a different dynamic. It's who can get a leg up on whom, and how can you take all their financial information and dig through it and find evidence against them and point fingers. And it's really damaging. And they're going to be in front of a judge tomorrow, put on their case. That judge will hear it for 4-6 hours and then decide the rest of their lives. As opposed to collaborative, people are making their own decisions with help.
And the other thing, I mean, it's so good for somebody to sit down with someone like yourself, because by taking that pause and going through about, like you say, what is the end result that you want and what are you moving towards, but it also really helps them keep down their legal fees. Because if they haven't gone through that process and taken that time, and when they get in front of the lawyer, they're then dealing with a lot of their emotion and a lot of their finance and a lot of their, sorry, my cat is joining in on the.
Hi, Cat. Oh, I think you muted, Mitzy. Or your kitty muted you.
My cat muted me. I don't know what that says, but
They wanted
but
your full attention.
yeah, exactly. But when you meet with a lawyer, if you haven't taken that time, then they end up spending time dealing with the person's emotions and stuff like that, and they're billing at insane dollar amounts per hour for that, when that's not really the stuff that you should be doing. But if you haven't taken the time to meet with someone like yourself, Brenda, then that's what ends up happening. So like, it's such a, it's so helpful for anyone going through a divorce to sit down with someone like yourself and take that time. It's one of those things where they'll save a lot of money and a lot of emotional stress if they meet with someone like yourself and work through the process.
I agree. And I think sometimes it can be hard for people to think like of the cost efficiencies, what's the word I'm looking for? The process efficiencies. When you work with multiple people and everyone's kind of staying in their lane, versus people will go, oh, I'm just going to hire an attorney because then it's going to be less because I have one professional. But if that professional is wearing all the hats that they're not necessarily trained to, so if you have an attorney who's acting as your therapist and your financial advisor and your realtor and your mortgage broker and all the things that, and all the different professions that might come into play, a guardian ad litem, someone as a child advocate, a co-parenting coach. There are so many different spaces where people can use support. And if you use those professionals to do what they are trained in doing, then I think most often people do spend less money, but they also get a way better outcome. If someone is sitting with me going through their finances, I can go through their finances a whole lot faster than an attorney or a therapist, and hopefully way more accurately. But I should not be practicing law, so I shouldn't be giving anyone legal advice. I should be I definitely talk to them about the process and their choices, but not what the law would say in my or any other jurisdiction. An attorney should be doing that, I shouldn't be telling anyone how to sell their house. I should be saying, ideally, you get a good professional who's the right one for you. And that's, I talked about 3 Ps. That is the third piece. So professional, then you figure out your process, how you want to go about it. We talked about collaborative, you can mediate, you can litigate, you can do DIY if you're allowed in your area. So you figure out your process that meets your goals, then you look for your professionals. So who is the team you need in place in order to do the things you need to do in this divorce process? Are you going to need to sell your house? Then you need a realtor. Well, if you're working with a realtor who is not copacetic with you, who doesn't understand the process, who isn't supportive, who maybe just doesn't match your personality style, things are going to be a lot rougher. And the same thing with the financial advisor. Like, I'm not for everyone. My background before I was doing this, like I said, I was teaching yoga. So I went from yogi to financial advisor to divorce planner to mediator, and it all kinds of fits together for me and how I practice. But if someone wants a real, like, cut and dry type A, let's cut to the chase, or very abrupt personality, I'm not that person. But there's someone out there who is. So if in finding their professional team, people are also thoughtful about, where do I feel I'm going to get the support I need and the information? If someone really needs a lot of hand-holding or time taken in answers, and they really want things explained well to them, that's one professional. If they just want someone who's going to, like, give me a yes or no and let me move on, that's another. So it's not only putting together your team of people who have the expertise you need, it's finding the right people who support you, just like we would look for our friends, except we're looking for our professional team going through this, like, what can be a really hard process.
What are some of the big pitfalls that you see people fall into, or what would be sort of some of those sort of first pieces of advice that you would give somebody to sort of get them started on, what do they need to gather, or what would be those sort of first steps or things?
Really good question. I think the first thing is get clear on your goals. The second thing is to figure out how you want to go about it. I really encourage people, when they're weighing their options, to take the least aggressive step first for your situation, because you can always get more aggressive. So if you start out in mediation or you start out in collaborative process and it's not working, your spouse is not participating or withholding information, and you need the backing of the court system, you can always go to court. You can get more aggressive. But if you start out like having your spouse served in the lunchroom at their place of work and they're surprised by it, and you haven't had any discussions, that's a bold and aggressive move, excuse me. You can't walk that back. Like, you're starting off like, okay, war, this is war. We're going to fight this out. So I think one of the unknown mistakes that people make is they just think, oh, I have to hire an attorney and serve my spouse, and I shouldn't tell them, I should surprise them. I see that a lot. And then they're like, what just happened? We should be able to work this out. Like, no, you made them very angry. You're already not getting along because people who are in a good marriage and good communicators are generally not the people who are getting divorced. There's something not working there. So by like being really aggressive and strong and basically putting on the gloves on to start, that can cause things to be way worse. Interestingly, people with children most often say, we want to put the kids first. And then that doesn't play out in reality, because in reality, their concerns are for their well-being, their security, their future, their finances. So there's like cognitive dissonance there or incongruity there. So if people really work on, if the kids are first, what does that actually look like? And what does that mean? Or, I mean, let's call it like it is. If your biggest concern is, and a lot of women, especially middle-aged and older women's biggest concern is, I'm going to be living on the street eating cat food. They'll be sharing with your kitty, So it's understanding like what your real dynamics are is another thing. Being forced into these norms of divorce, like mom should keep the house and dad should give up the house. Dad should pay alimony if alimony is part of where you live, because every jurisdiction is different, and mom should get alimony. Like thinking that way doesn't really serve people. When I mediate, I do a process called informed mediation. So it's a little different because we do go through all their financial information together and sort it out. But the first thing that I do is meet with them each individually to talk about what their goals are. And then you do uncover a little bit of like, mom will say, I know I need to keep the house. I have to keep the house for the kids, but I've hated that house. I never liked that house. I don't want to mow the lawn. I'm afraid of the upkeep, and on and on and on. And then you'll talk to dad in the separate meeting and he'll be like, oh, I love that house, but I know I need to give it to her because that's what I'm supposed to do. If you get that kind of, this is what we're supposed to do stuff out of the way, and talk about what you really want and want to do, then you can kind of get rid of a lot of the needless time and energy and money that is spent on the process. I mean, when you think about it, if someone's negotiating back and forth about a house because they think they should keep it, but they don't really want it, if you just acknowledge right away, well, he wants it and she doesn't, how do we meet that goal? You saved hours.
Yeah, that's so true, is, just asking those questions, because people do fall into that, oh, this is what's supposed to be done or the norm. And it's like, well, not every family is the same. What works for one family may not work for another. You also mentioned one thing, and I think that this is a really big thing too, which is, one spouse is always the spouse that initially thinks of it and starts the process. And sometimes the other spouse is completely blindsided. You think probably they shouldn't, but often that is the case. And I think part of that disconnect and where some of that anger raises, the person who has been thinking about it for a while, it's not like they sort of woke up one day and said, oh, I think I'll ask my spouse for a divorce. They've been thinking about it for months or years or whatever. The other person,
the average is 2 years.
2 years. Yeah. So the other person has to kind of get with the program, boom, like that. So part of it is just giving them space to digest it. You mentioned that so do you always meet with both parts of the couple, or do you sometimes work with just one spouse? Or
yeah, not always. I'll work with it's more my role depending on whether I'm working with a couple or an individual. So if I'm working with a couple, I'm a neutral by definition. So I am there to help them come up with agreements and give them information, maybe give them a backdrop of what would happen if they go through the court system. But in that capacity, I'm never saying, oh, like that's a win, or you should do this. I'm really helping them make their decisions, which sometimes is really hard because they're not necessarily decisions I would make, but that's the point. They own it. Like, I'm not telling anyone what to do. They've lived their lives and they will continue to live their lives. So they're making their decisions that best suit them. And I'm making sure that they're making those decisions knowing the information they need to know to make them, knowing their financial decisions and whatnot, or circumstances. If I work with an individual, then I'm an advocate, much as an attorney is, or I'm a coach. So I am solidly on their side, in their corner, helping them think through what is best for them and how to walk through this just on them. I'm not a neutral. So that's the primary difference in how I interact.
When you're working with a couple, do you always meet with them both together, or do you meet with them individually as well as together?
For example, we work on budgets and expenses. So they forecast their expenses as they're living individually moving forward. And for some people, that's challenging. So I have a client I'm meeting with next week. I'm a neutral. I'm mediating with them together, but I'm meeting with her separately, but it's totally transparent. So her spouse knows that she and I are going to meet. He can come if he wants to, but he's already done his budget. He's really comfortable with it. She's feeling very like she needs to really walk through this and understand it in detail. So in that case, I'll meet individually. Usually when there's an imbalance in knowledge, whether real or perceived, where someone doesn't feel secure enough to sit at the same table and make the same decisions or make the decisions, and they need to understand it more clearly. And even in that, I'm careful too. There's no judgment or there's no advice. It really is about education and understanding.
Gotcha.
Meeting individually that way. Ideally, in mediation, either all of the conversations are joint, so everyone knows, or if there's a separate conversation held with one of the parties, then I make sure the other one knows about it. So we don't want anyone feeling like, oh, they're talking behind my back, or, oh, it's, as long as they know and they're invited to participate, then I will meet with people individually. Honestly, it doesn't happen very often. Usually it's both parties together.
Gotcha. Perfect. Sharmin, do you have some additional questions?
Well, we're wrapping up. Can you just tell our listeners about your book?
So my book was born of my wish that I had some kind of roadmap or guidebook that was what I needed when I went through divorce, and trying to balance you got to make all these like really logical, supposedly financial decisions. And there are those out there who say, once you're getting divorced, this is just a business the dissolution of a business, not a marriage. And you have to come at it as though it's a business, and you have to be really logical about everything. And I am not in that camp, because I think dissolving a marriage, even if you're the one who wants it, is really emotional, and you're grieving and going through those processes and you're letting go of dreams. So I wanted something that allows people to kind of work with their headspace and their heart space. So yes, you need to make some really serious decisions. So you got to get your head on straight for that, and you need to get good information. But you're also, you're figuring out so many things that perhaps you weren't ready to and might not be ready to for a while. How can you put yourself in a space where you're equipped to do that? So the book is meant to help people at the beginning of the divorce process, or when they're thinking about divorce, get smarter about what their options are so they're able to pick the thing that's right for them. It's all about choice. It's about what's right for you. And it can be a mix and match. And even when we talk about, you can go from DIY divorce to mediated divorce to collaborative divorce to litigated divorce, and there's uncontested and contested, and it's got its whole other vocabulary. So, but it's still a continuum. You can do a little DIY and a little mediated, or a little mediated and a little litigated. So it's kind of like, this is a horrible analogy, and I'm going to have to think of a better one. It's almost like it's this buffet, and you pick what is the best thing for you, and you don't need to do all of it. but you have choices. And usually instead, in my experience, for most people, divorce is treated like, okay, you're getting a divorce, go hire an attorney, file, jump into the court system, 2 years and $50,000 later, you will be divorced. Your kids went through all this stuff. It could have been much better. The book is meant to, let's try to make it a little better, you know? And I will say to people, divorce sucks. And what we're trying to do is make it suck less. We're not saying divorce is awesome, like it's the bomb, everyone should do it. It's not that. And I'll have people after I speak come up to me and say, like, I don't know how you do what you do. What you do is awful. Like, well, actually, what I do, what we do is try to make a thing that is really painful and can be a bad experience less damaging and better.
And where can one find your book? Where can...
That's an interesting question too. So you can find it on Amazon. There's a Kindle version or an ebook version and a hard copy version. However, what I learned when we were pre-launching the book was like two sides of the same coin. People would reach out and go, I really want your book, but we have a joint Amazon account. So I can't buy your book because it's going to show up on there and that's going to create a whole bunch of issues. And then on the flip side, I had a friend who did buy my book. She's happily married, has been so for a long time. They just actually had an anniversary and she bought the book and her husband saw it on their account and he was just like, do we need to talk? He came home, was like, do we need to talk? She's like, I bought it to support Brenda. So because of that, they can reach out and buy it directly from the office. We can either send a hard copy or an ebook copy from the office. So it doesn't show up in their Amazon account and cause information before it's ready to be shared.
And that's on your website.
Yeah, they can reach out just through the contact on the website. And the website's Bridging Divorce Solutions.
Okay.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. This was really enlightening. I know our listeners are going to get a lot from listening to your insights.
Well, I really appreciated joining you, and I'm so excited to have been with you and love what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Transforming Lives Panel Podcast. We hope that you receive some nuggets of wisdom and seeds to plant along your journey of transformation. If you enjoyed what you heard today, we encourage you to let us know and to share us with those that matter in your life. If you would like to connect with anyone from the panel or our guest speaker, you can find all of the ways to connect in our show notes. We have so much gratitude for you, and we are so thankful to be a part of your day. Until next time, take great care.